Hail cheaters. Welcome to the Always Cheating Podcast. My name is Josh. I'm here with Brandon. Brandon, how are you?
Fantastic, Josh. We're in the midst. We're knee deep in the preseason content, but I feel like this weekend for you and me felt like the last weekend of summer. You had a nice trip to see family. I went to like the local county fair, swam in a lake, just basically kissing goodbye to summer. And now let the games begin, not the Olympics. Let the Premier League begin and let the fall weather commence. It is. I'm in my rural house where there's no central air, but there's no real circulation of the air and I'm a little sweaty. So if you think our takes on defenders and goalkeepers are sweaty, you should see my pits, honestly.
Okay. All right. Now I'm ready. I'm ready to monitor. Thankfully it's a dark shirt, so we really want to be able to tell. I'm actually kind of the other way. I was running the 8. I just came back. So I was in Michigan. I actually have my nice little. I got some new Michigan State
gear.
Represent
the former institution.
A little champion sweatshirt. I was happy about that. Like that's a nice little. I have to say
ads,
for
Josh.
anyone. Well, no free ads. That's true. But for anyone under like 30, I feel like Champion has become like a cool brand. And when I was a kid, Champion was like, it was like a kind of like second, like, again, no free ads, nor am I going to insult anybody, but it was not at the like kind of Nike tier of clothing
the
brands.
The thing with Champion is you could find it anywhere. And it is, I think you were trying to show the little sewn on C on the sleeve.
It's here somewhere.
Shout out to all of our friends at Home Field Apparel. And I'm sure many of you listening have heard of Home Field. They're kind of replicating that with the little Home Field logo on the sleeve. And listen, to pivot back to the Premier League, I am in full like new kit season. I actually went to Fulham's website to buy the new Fulham and like praise be, both the home and away shirts are cool. I mean, the away shirt in particular is cool, but I love how you get a pop-up message. Like I want to get an Anthony Robinson jersey. There's been no real firm rumors of him departing the club or anything, but you get a pop-up when you try to order a player jersey where they're like, just be forewarned, these players, the transfer window is still open. We don't want anybody disappointed and asking for their money back. So, you got the Dulwich Hamlet kit via this summer. Do you feel like you're going to get bit by the shirt bug, the kit bug?
I don't know. I have worn I guess I actually wore the kit on our kickoff pod. I'm not a kit wearer myself. I don't really enjoy wearing kits. Like it's just not for me. I'm like one of those. It's my personality. I don't like, holding up signs at protests either. I have a certain kind of, it's like there's somebody, I don't want to draw attention to myself in that way. It makes me a little shy, but this kid actually, I learned an effective go around, by the way, if you're trying to get a hot kit, is to go to the sponsors website. So this Dulwich Hamlet kit, Dulwich Hamlet, right? I'm not supposed to say
no W, silent W.
Yeah, Dulwich Hamlet. It was sold out on their club website, but then I went to the sponsors website and they had plenty of sizes. So that's a word to the wise if you're looking for a hard to find.
Just go to Emirates.com for your favorite football kit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's true. But you know what? They probably have it. This is defected. It's a record label, and they had it. So, all right. So we are, as you said, the Premier League is actually getting close. We're not less than 2 weeks away from the start of the season. I think, I think the unofficial start of the season is really, I guess it's quasi-official because it's a friendly of sorts, is the Community Shield, which kicks off on a week from today. And I think that'll be a fun one. I still want to call it the Charity Shield, even though it hasn't been the Charity Shield for like a decade. The Community Shield, though, is Man United and Man City. So that's kind of a fun, little derby action. It feels like we've had a lot of Arsenal, Man City. We've had a lot of Liverpool, Man City. Man United, Man City kind of gives us a little bit of a, something new. Maybe did Mourinho win an FA Cup when he was there? Van Gaal did, I know. So maybe that wasn't that the one where Mourinho had all the players like holding up the number 3, like because they won like 3 tin pot trophies. And three crap trophies. The crap treble. So anyway, so I'm looking forward to that because I think there's a lot to learn from that game. We've got Man City. You have a lot of returning players. Gvardiol is actually back with the squad, for example, and Man United though is really, I think. Or did I say Man United? Anyway, Man City, a lot of players who played in Europe. Unfortunately, it does look increasingly like we're going to be losing Alvarez, by the way. Atleti has opened up talks with Man City. And so, which I'm just sad about. I just like Alvarez. I enjoy watching him play. It's never a young, fun player leaving the Premier League is never something that I'm excited about, but I can totally understand why he wants to make the move. I'm sure there's lots of money. I don't really understand Atleti's finances, by the way, either. I sort of think of them in this sort of, I guess they're kind of like Arsenal, where they're like the third, they don't have as much money as some of the other clubs, but they can occasionally drop like significant coin on certain players.
Well, they're operating in a great band. So La Liga is obviously dominated by Real Madrid and Barcelona, but Atleti are always near the top. They play in the Champions League, which is incredible exposure for younger talent that's raising their profile. And for Alvarez to go there and to say, I'm going to have consistent starts in the Champions League. And it was under Simeone, you never know if you're going to be able to challenge for a title in La Liga. He's done it before.
Banged out 2 La Liga titles in the last 12 years, right? So absolutely.
I mean, if you look at the players too that they've gone for, they're always the Alvarez type, where they're really special players, but somehow just never the top dogs at their club. Now, Conor Gallagher, we talked about midfielders last week, but Conor Gallagher to Atleti, kind of like he fits that profile of like attack dog that Simeone likes. I think that'd be a really interesting move for him.
Yeah, I mean, Trippier's career basically got rejuvenated, right? Once he went to Atleti. So yeah, even if it was just like a 1-year move, I mean, it's like an apprenticeship under a great manager, right? Like it feels like it's sort of.
I said attack dog, and I forget my sound effect there.
Wow, I love that. That's the top dog. The X
dog in him.
X-Doggingham. Yeah, exactly.
New to the always cheating. Once the season kicks off, we've got lots of great reoccurring segments that we're going to bring back, including the all-important X Factor. Who's got that X-Dog in him? And maybe that applies to some of the defenders and goalkeepers that we're going to talk about. So, Josh, we're in the third of 3 sort of positional previews. We did forwards 2 weeks ago, midfielders last week. We're going to combine defenders and goalkeepers this week. I feel like, is it counterintuitive to say this is where fantasy managers can get the most creative? So what I mean by that is forwards and midfielders can, one might say they're driven by a template, or one might say we have some more assured certainty of where a lot of those points can come from. You can get creative in the forward and midfielder slots, certainly once the season goes and we start to, you're able to sort of like fish around in the stats and what you see in the matches and the lineups. But with defense, I feel like there's not going to be as much unification amongst the fantasy managers going into game week 1. So it's not, you don't want to necessarily express yourself through your defense, but I think you can be different here.
Yeah. I want to agree with you because I'm an agreeable kind of guy, but I don't know. I don't know if I do this particular season, because I agree with you up to a point, because I do think that that there's like a lot of room for different options. It doesn't feel set in stone, the defenders that you pick, like up to and including, literally everybody, literally every single player. Like I've had drafts with Guardiola. Like for a while there, I felt like he was an absolute lock in my 11, and then just the last couple of days he's gone out of it. He kind of came back in this afternoon. But when it comes to Man United or Arsenal, I should say, I started off with Gabriel, and then I moved him to Saliba, and now I'm wondering if I can talk myself into Ben White, right? So I think that so I think what's interesting, and the reason why there's so much rotation there, I think, is because it's an unusual season with the midfield and the forward spots so unsettled, right? Like up to and including, again, literally every single player, right? There's not a single midfielder, forward, or defender going into the season that is like an absolute stone cold lock in everybody's squad, right? And I'll pull up here, Brandon. I went to FF Stuff, Okay, you got to say it like that. There's actually legally
they have an ongoing sponsorship with Stuff Magazine, or is it Maxim?
They do. Stuff Magazine is back in print, just to support this particular project. So the ownership right now is. Now, certainly, if you include like a band of players, there are some players that are that you would I think like one of Isak and Watkins is going to be in most teams, right? Maybe it feels increasingly like we're going to see one of Haaland and Salah. Haaland just keeps scoring goals, makes it much harder to avoid him just because, again, we talked about this on the forward pod, so we don't need to like rehash it too much, but it just makes the captaincy so easy, for one thing, right? It's just like, if nothing else, like you have a really consistent option that you can just get double points from, every single week. So I think that's really where I've been increasingly zeroing in on Haaland as a quasi lock. But again, it's not Chelsea an absolute
this weekend in a preseason friendly.
Exactly. Yeah, he's just been banging them in, right? And so I think he's super tempting, but again, so is Isak, right? Southampton at home in game week 1. Ollie Watkins, arguably the premier kind of all around forward in the in the Premier League, like top 2, I would say, right? Like in terms of like at least the sort of designated forward spot positions in FPL, right? Like Saka is a forward in a kind of real world sense, but in the game he's a midfielder, right? So so I think that. But when you just look at all of the players that are being selected, though, we're just not seeing the really kind of highly skewed ownership that we saw last year, right? I felt like going into last season, Haaland was at like 75% or something like that, right? It was massively high. I think Salah was super high as well. You had a number of other players that were just a little underpriced, right? And so it was kind of driving them up into that 60-70% range. And this year, I mean, for the most owned player, and this is up to date as of, I think, like an hour ago, the most owned player is at 55%. That's not bad, right? That's survivable, right? Like you can go into game week 1 without Isak. It's not going to kill you. Same with Watkins at 52, Palmer at 50%. There's just, Haaland, I mean, arguably the premier fantasy asset is at 38.8% ownership at the moment, right? Like it's just not, it's not an overwhelming number. It's not going to, even if he gets like a hat trick or something, right? It's not because again, it's like you are also going to be able to captain a player yourself, right? And in theory, the player you're captaining is someone you think could do extremely well too, right? So even if he bangs on a hat trick and you get, a goal, assist, and 3 bonus from Isak, it's a 5-point difference, right? In that particular scenario. So it's just not that much of a killer, right? And that 5-point difference for a player that costs, 6.5 million less, right? Right. Yeah. And so like there's a lot of squad building that you can do if you opt for the duo of Watkins and Isak up front and just kind of sacrifice those Haaland points. And so I think the debate is still, really, I don't know. Like, I mean, where have you kind of settled in one way or the other? I know last week you were very much in the kind of Salah, Haaland, have them both zone. Are you still?
Yeah, my current draft still has Haaland and Salah. My question back at you is, I like this. Like, this is definitely like the impact that FPL was wanting to have with pricing players like Haaland at 15 million, is to sort of bring a little bit more democracy to it. What happens to this 38.8 ownership on Haaland if he scores a hat trick against Chelsea in game week 1?
Well, I don't know, because I mean, it's not easy to get to a 15 million player, right?
So like, it is the knock-on desired effect of pricing Haaland this way is it becomes a huge advantage for people who do spend for Haaland and bring him in, and if it converts to a hat trick, if it converts to big points, if he becomes like quasi differential, as stupid as that sounds, that's also what you can read into this, is how Haaland is a huge opportunity for managers right now.
Right. Yeah. It's like you're investing in like an expensive like Apple stock or something.
Like
Haaland. Like, well,
this is second.
and you're like, oh, Yeah, if the new foldable iPhone is finally announced this fall, like the stock is going to skyrocket, and even though it costs a lot of money to get in, you're still going to be glad that you did it even at the elevated price. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that's like a reasonable argument. It feels a little too like kind of fear based to me, right? Like because I feel like we all know that Haaland is capable of scoring a hat trick, right? Like him scoring a hat trick is not like. I don't think you should ever rush to buy anybody just because they score a hat trick necessarily, right? I mean, I think it's the fact that they play Ipswich at home in game week 2 that makes it. Well, it's not fear. I mean, sure. I mean, a little bit. I mean, but again, it's just one player's. I mean, listen, I have Haaland, and I feel like I've sort of found myself rhetorically taking up the side of the non-Haaland.
It's good for the pod. Here. Keep going.
Well, yeah, but I think there's a reasonable case we made, right? Which is that you're just like that. The assumption would be that you can find a captain option that can get very close to what you can get from Captain Haaland, right? Very close, even if not quite all the way there. And unless he gets 29 points in a game week, right? Unless he gets 6 goals and 2 assists or something like that, like you're going to be probably okay. And because he is so expensive, right? Like literally 6 million and more than like all of the other better forward, like all the other similar forward options. That money allows you to own, you could have Salah and Palmer or you could have Palmer and Son, or you could have some combination of kind of double digit top class forwards. Maybe you really want to have Trent Alexander-Arnold in your team. I don't personally. We'll talk about that in a second. But it does allow you to build a team where kind of every spot might be better than the Haaland owners players might be in that spot, and that kind of on balance scores you more points. Like when you look at the total points.
We had a question from one of our Patreon supporters who's going into sort of a customizable fantasy league. I'm not sure the service that he was using to do this, but their points weren't necessarily based on the FPL game itself. You were getting points for, and not just BPS, but literal points for crosses and key passes and whatnot. And he was weighing Haaland versus Saka. And it's kind of goes with what you're saying here, Josh, of where is the squad balance versus just the sheer output that you get from Haaland. And can you get Haaland and then replicate what you would get from, other options like Saka and Salah elsewhere more creatively from players like Eze and Gordon cheaper that work there?
Right.
Or is it the reverse where you're going to reap more from those midfield assets like Saka and Salah, and you push Haaland aside for that reason because you can replicate what Haaland is doing with Isak and Watkins? And that is, I think, the thing that everyone will try to answer before August 16th, and I believe is impossible to answer.
Yeah, it's like in the baseball terms, it's the like VORP, right? Value over replacement player, right? And the question is it easier to replicate Haaland's returns, or is it easier to replicate, like Salah or whomever, right? And or Gordon. I don't know. I think it's actually a really. I do think. I mean, I think it's a great debate, right? And
we're going to put it. Maybe a computer could do. I'm firing up the always cheating computer right now.
It's overwhelming my
unfortunately, I have to reboot the computer. But then once it comes back online, we'll have the answer to that. Going back to the stuff page of the overall ownership, there's a name that speaks to what we're about to talk about that really jumps out at me, and that is Matt Turner at Nottingham Forest at 4.0, 23.2% ownership. So what does this tell you about the engagement of people in the preseason, Josh? Is that auto teams,
a lot of Americans,
auto ads for Matt Turner? Like if you just started your team and it auto generated?
I don't think so, but I mean, do we think is there any chance he could start? Like,
no.
I sort of like have just completely written him off as an option, right? Like, when did he lose his spot? It was like around January.
Yeah, and he lost
year, right?
it pretty emphatically. Yeah. Now, I'm not here to besmirch Matt Turner.
Oh, he was terrible.
No, I I don't want to say I'm a defender of Matt Turner, but it's so easy to say like so and so's terrible. No, he was not terrible.
Well, I'm not saying I'm not saying he's a bad person or that he is a terrible goalkeeper. I guarantee he's a better goalkeeper than me, for example, right? Guarantee it. But but by the standards of the Premier, like
top flight,
it's right there in the title, Brandon. The top flight, the best league in the world, or so they would like you to think, right? It's the
so this was I don't mean that Premier League went down to Forest and said Matt Turner is besmirching the brand, like he's ruining the brand. He's bad,
bad
like
for the
a
brand.
broken Windows theory with Matt Turner.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I actually do happen to think that on balance, the Premier League is the best league in the world, right? And so I think, but yeah, it was January 30th was the last time he started for Forest, and he just really didn't earn his spot, right? And who was it? Was it Sells? Is that who they brought in? I should know this immediately. Sells.
This doesn't bode well for my content creation this episode, where I don't remember, but I'm not.
Well, Sells is a hard name to remember. To be fair, you don't really want Matt Turner. I think that's fair. I haven't really found that like 4 million keeper that there's really. I mean, maybe Fabianski if you just think that like. I don't know. I mean, if Fabianski like really was basically lost his spot,
well,
to
he
Areola,
100% did, right? So,
right.
He only got his minutes last season because of Areola's injury. You could argue Areola is therefore injury prone, so go with Fabianski as a backup. But Fabianski lost his spot because he's older and older and older and losing his step and. I think you're more likely to see somebody like step in and fill the backup shoes for Fabianski. I think it's interesting. Maybe we should save this for later. The goalkeeper rotation conversation. That's like a big one. It's like a big one to open up this discussion. We basically broke this pod into two sections, right? We'll do defenders first and then goalkeepers. And the defenders we do it's more of a tier system like we did for the midfielder and forwards. With the goalkeepers, it's more like a series of questions. It's like a bunch of questions followed by a couple of recommendations at the end. So that's because it's very hard to rank because like how would you even do it, right? You'd like goalkeepers, like Allison is the best keeper. Well, I would basically like never own him in fantasy, right? So it's sort of it doesn't really make sense, I think, to look at it through that lens, right? I think the big question for me is whether I'm willing to spend $9 million on keepers this season, and if so, whether it's better to actually try like you said, whether it's worth trying rotation again, or literally just be like, I'm just going to have Jordan Pickford at $5 million and just kind of roll with it, and through thick and thin. Yeah, I'm more of the mind of it's not a goalkeeper rotation, but to have a 4.5 starter on the bench is just insurance that you will never have to spend a transfer on a goalkeeper unless you play a wild card.
Yeah. You and I both spent transfers on goalkeepers last year. So like, who knows, it's you never like in a long and winding fantasy season, Brandon, you never know and now that you're going to have 5 transfers at times, I think it'll be easier to spend that goalkeeper transfer. All right. Well, let's move into some more talk before we get into the defenders. I had just a couple quick kind of in the news updates I wanted to share. So, so the Charity Shield, I mentioned that's a week from Sunday, or a week from today as we're recording this Sunday evening. Arteta confirmed that the late arriving Arsenal player should be fine for game week 1. Now, that's just one club, but I think that is probably symptomatic of the rest of the Premier League. I think in my head I was thinking about this extended break that they were all getting, and I was feeling like it was really going to start to infringe on game week 1. And the more I think about it, the more I think it's fine. They had a bunch of time off, and they're basically, unless you're playing in the Charity Shield, it's like the European tours the American tours are mostly over, right? And so you have 2 weeks at home. To more or less to get ready for the season. That should be plenty for established Premier League veterans, right? So I am sort of increasingly less worried about the risk of maybe one guy misses, comes on 30, like with 30 minutes to go in one match or something like that. But I would say most of the players I have in my squad right now don't really fall into that rotation risk category. Another move that I thought was kind of interesting. This is a Fab Romano. Is he man or is he bot? We may never know, Brandon. But Fab Romano says that Nikolai Füllkrug is set to join West Ham from Borussia Dortmund. It sounds like that is very. It isn't like a rumor. It looks like it is like basically like about to happen. So of course, watch it not happen now. But it sounds like it's about to happen. A little bit older, which comes with pluses and minuses. But he's a 31-year-old German national team forward. You remember he scored a very dramatic late goal in the group stages for Germany to get them a 1-1 draw and advance as group winners. It didn't really help them in the end because they ended up losing in the quarterfinals, but still. So Füllkrug had 16 goals and 10 assists in 46 appearances for Borussia Dortmund last season. I kind of like this signing just because I feel like established Bundesliga veteran feels like he can come in. Maybe he helps. I mean, they have a lot of talented midfielders right now at West Ham, right? There's a lot of you've got Bowen, you've got and like a number of different options. Yeah, Kudus especially, right? So yeah, Paqueta, so there's a lot of good players, but they're but Antonio unfortunately is getting older. Obviously, Danny Ings has really struggled with his health, and so it feels to me like this could be an awesome signing for West Ham. I'm kind of excited about it.
Yeah, they haven't had a real number 9. I feel like the last time they actually had a go of it was just a string of transfers that didn't work from Sebastian Haller, who ultimately
worked
went
out
to
in
Dortmund
the end for him. Yeah,
worked fine for Haller, and then for Scamacca, which was like again, as I likened to owning him in fantasy, was like eating food out of a garbage can. Somehow lucked his way to the Italian squad as their number 9, but that never worked at West Ham. So Füllkrug seems like maybe it could work. Yeah. It could work. And for a team that I've like the departure of David Moyes somehow signaled like the death of it was Declan Rice leaving and then Moyes going. It was like the component parts could have been replaced, but all these parts of the glory days of the last 5 years for West Ham. So I like it. I like that they're sticking to buying some renowned players.
Looking at it through a fantasy lens, what do you think about all of the coaching changes that are happening? And like I'm thinking about it more and more when it comes to Chelsea and I mean West Ham to a lesser degree maybe, but like Chelsea and Liverpool, and it's like I like Liverpool and all these friendlies this summer, right? Like they've had some very nice performances, but I'm like, should I care at all? Like should I, should it be like affecting my kind of thought process? Like all these clubs, like most of the players are not back yet. It's like I don't know. I just think it's like really it's making it very hard for me to assess some of these players, right? I mean, the same thing with, Cuckoo. He scored 3 goals in the preseason. It's looked really good, but 2 of those 3 goals are penalties, right? And so if we assume that Cole Palmer is back on pens when he gets back, how much should we take that into account, for example, right? Like it looks very impressive when you just see the 3 goals, right? But then you dig into it, it's like, well, pens, it's not. Yeah.
I think Chelsea is the most terrifying managerial change, I think, for fantasy managers, and that Maresca is totally unproven at this level and as good of a job as he did with Leicester. Yeah. It's sort of like a combination of what's Maresca's highest level combined with what's the level of absolute dumpster fireness that's at Chelsea right now. So those sort of things combine to be good food for thought for fantasy managers. But then you go back to West Ham, you've got Lopetegui coming in, and you're thinking, well, I've recently seen him manage Wolves in the Premier League. I know what he wants to achieve. I know what his goals are. I can then understand how that might map on a West Ham squad. So you can take some of it, but there's some debate happening on FPL Twitter earlier this week about how much do you take just from preseason results, full stop. And most people would argue nothing. Take nothing from. You can't even take lineups from it. But I think like Holland is like the big blue chip stocks like Holland and Salah are really the only thing I ever look at when it comes to preseason. Are these guys who I know exactly what to expect from them? They're healthy and they're in the right mindset.
And I think Son too, right? I think the forgotten man, I mean, Son's got 3 goals and an assist in the preseason. Kind of the cheapest of all the premium options, and yet very. I mean, let me pull up my little chart here again. He's not even cracking the top 20 most owned players in fantasy, and he's an absolutely fantastic fantasy asset. He has been for many, many years, right? So I think he's another one too. Where, I guess I am inclined to agree with you. I mean, I think. Well, I was sort of maybe, and Cuckoo is the one a little bit. It's good to see him playing well, right? Like even if you qualify some of the goals, I mean, as a 6.5 million player who could end up playing out of position right at forward, the one thing we really wanted to see this summer was him doing something, right? And so even if you sort of qualify everything and put no stock in it, the fact that he's doing really well puts him like kind of firmly on my radar, right? Whether I start with him in game week 1 or not. And so I think maybe it's a little bit of that, where like it's like the kind of players that you just need to see something, right? Like you just need to see some glimmer that there's like something to be excited about, or it's just kind of hard to have them on the radar at all. So, all right, well, let's move on, Brandon. I think that covers in the news. Wanted to just do a quick shout out. We got a ton of new and upgraded too, Brandon. Not just new, but upgraded patrons this week. I want to do a quick thank you, and I want to remind people it's the first of the month. It's a great time to technically it's the 4th of the month. It's my mother's birthday, Brandon, today. Just I'm sure everyone listening knew that, but just a reminder. Yeah, happy birthday, Tracy. That first of the month is a great time to become a new Patreon supporter. We're kicking off our Patreon exclusive podcast this week. That should be Thursday, Brennan. I know I'm sort of committing you here, but I think we can make that work by hook or by crook. And so we're excited to do that. We're also going to do a deadline day pod for our patrons next week as well. And so that'll be a lot of fun too. So looking forward to that. More to come on all that front. I'm working on a welcome message in our Patreon, Brandon, with some more information. Nice. But a quick shout out to new Patreon supporters, or new Patreon supporters and new producers. James C, thank you for becoming a producer patron. 12th Man, James Holland, Ube, James Holland returning, of course, Ube Salikoff, Martin Groen, Mike Williams, Matt Barnes, Eli Lindsay, Hans Buhler, and BP. Thank you, Brendan. These are all just in the last. Rich warm applause. Huge. We don't often talk about the fact that we record these pods in front of a live studio audience, but it's nice, and they stay so quiet until just the right moment.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Thank you for coming. This is great.
Applause, please. You get an extra podcast each week. You get access to our Discord. You get an ad-free podcast feed, right? So all of the pods, including the main pods, are all ad-free on that feed. You get kit giveaway contests, tons of mini leagues. I would say, I don't know why, but it feels like the Discord is more active this preseason, Brennan, than maybe it's ever been, like since we've started using the Discord. So
the best thing I saw this week was our friend Andy Penn started a new league for it. It was a question that we had a couple of weeks ago. I have a kid who's starting to engage with fantasy, and how do I get the most fun out of that, or bond with my kid? And Andy set up a league within our Patreon Discord for anyone who's 18 and under.
Oh, cool.
Or if you want to co-manage a team with your kid to do. So on our Patreon pod, we'll talk a little bit more about the details there.
Oh, that's great.
If you want to join, you could join.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, we'll keep Adam Johnson out of that league, Brandon. But otherwise, it sounds like a good. That's great. I want my kid to start. No more. You got to stop. This is like when our friend Steve recorded our first, produced our first, the old pod, the old In the Wheelhouse pod. So you get an extra podcast each week, which I mentioned like 9 times now. We go to patreon.com/alwayscheating to support the podcast. Even if you don't want to do any of that stuff and you just want to say thank you, that's a great way to do it. Brent, we also are supporting, or we have a sponsor this season. Do you want to do a quick shout out for a Fantasy Football Hub?
Oh, yeah. We're super excited to partner with Fantasy Football Hub again this season. This is no joke, Josh. Win your mini league with Fantasy Football Hub or get your money back. And we talked to Hub and we're like, is this a real thing? And they're like, of course. Like the level of engagement, you're yeah, confirmed. But it's true. Like we get this feedback from the listeners of our podcast too. Like your level of engagement with fantasy is going to reap results. And if you feel like this season you need an extra advantage, an extra edge, you need an extra tool. Well, Fantasy Football Hub just like has many tools that they sort of elegantly weave together. You can get your team rated by AI. They're, if you want real like human intelligence, there are experts who write for Hub every day and do their team reveals every week, giving advice. See the game week 1 squads from all of your favorite personalities on Twitter and across the FPL social sphere. Ben Krellen, a name we cite often on this podcast, is works at the Hub. He has his transfer planner spreadsheet available to members there. It's a fantastic one-stop shop for everything preseason. We were talking about transfers a minute ago, Josh. If you want to just get like become a wash in all of the results, who played, how many minutes did they play, goals, assists, etc. You've got a one-stop shop at Fantasy Football Hub. And the deal is, because of our partnership with them, you, the listener of Always Cheating, can get 50% off up until the game week 1 deadline. So make sure you go to fantasyfootballhub.co.uk/always, where you can get that 50% off of any tier of your choice at Fantasy Football Hub. So cool. Thanks again for supporting the show, Hub, and we'll see you game week 1.
Great. Perfect. Thank you, Brandon. So let's get into our defender talk here. And we got some feedback that my little chart, Brandon, my lovely little Excel doc that I've shared with our Patreon supporters in the Discord, was not hugely helpful on the YouTube stream. So I will not be sharing that this week. But Brandon, because we were just talking about the Hub, what I will do is I will share their fixture planner sorted by strong defensive fixtures to start the season. It's not necessarily going to be a guide for everything we talk about on this pod, but maybe you could take a look at our faces, Brent. I don't know how that's possible, but just in case it is, I'm going
seems implausible. Yeah.
It seems implausible, but we'll share that anyway in case anybody wants to have a peek. Okay, how do I get this?
I see it.
You see it. Okay, good. Yeah. He sees it, folks. Okay, there we go. All right.
YouTube.com/@alwayscheating if you want to check out this stream and see the chart that we're looking at. So what are we looking at, Josh?
Yeah, just defensive fixtures for the first 6 game weeks. But that's just, again, to give you something to look at while we're talking here, Brandon. So we're going to kick things off, though, with Elite Defender Fix. I've done a little more groupings this time around because I'm finding it hard to... No, I wouldn't say necessarily hard, but it's sort of like it's a matter of taste a little bit. It's a matter of what your taste is, so which players you want to go for in some of these brackets, right? So when it comes to elite defender picks, I think you've got to start with Arsenal defenders, and I think you've got 3 picks, really: Gabriel, Saliba, and Ben White. If you want to consider Jurrien Timber, you could. But again, that just feels super risky, given that Arsenal, just made a big signing of
Calafiori.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, he's been at $6 million, so they think he's going to start right off the bat, Calafiori. But Calafiori can play as a left back or a left-sided center back, so I think he sort of makes Timber a little risky. He also makes Gabriel, unfortunately, a little bit risky too. But I still think you can opt for any of those 3. I still think Gabriel is the first choice center back pairing with Saliba. And it really just depends on whether you value goal threat, in which case Gabriel takes the cake, strongest XG by far. That's over a couple of seasons too. A consistency of starts and maybe defender bonus points, then I think that Saliba would be up there second. And then just kind of overall routes to points would be Ben White, right? Like Ben White offers consistency of starts. He's going to offer more assist threat, I would say, of any of these 3. And maybe he can bang out, he'll score like a couple goals a season. The only problem with Ben White is that he is 0.5 million more expensive. And that little 0.5, that little 0.5 starts to make a pretty massive difference when you're trying to put together the perfect team. So at the moment in my squad, I've got Saliba. I'm a little spooked by Gabriel. I also started with Gabriel last season. I kind of upended my season at the start, and maybe I'm, it's like, should I you go with a clean slate, or should I take that as a lesson that I should just not, go in with him? And so, but I actually would really love to have Ben White if I can get to 6.5 million. And I'm starting to wonder if he might just be worth it, honestly. I think, the question really is whether how much you want to balance. And again, this is where looking at their first 6 fixtures is kind of handy, because how much do you want to balance their extremely strong, fantastic home fixtures with their truly horrible away fixtures that are almost 1-to-1, right? It's Wolves at home, game week 1, fantastic. Villa away, game week 2, very tough, right? Lost there last season. Villa have been very tough at home. First home fixture of the season for them as well. Have to imagine they're going to come in, playing looking very good. Brighton at home, new manager, great, like good spot for Arsenal. Spurs away, game week 4. Man City away, game week 5. Right, so North London derby, and then probably arguably their single most difficult match of the season.
Title's going to be decided by game week 5. It's incredible.
Exactly. I'm just glad they're getting out of the way, honestly, right? Like, just knock it out in game week 5. And then Leicester at home in game week 6, right? So you're sort of fantastic, terrible, fantastic, terrible, to start up the season. And so, but I still feel like you probably should have one Arsenal defender, right? Because they're just, such a strong defensive team. And those 3 fixtures are so good. And so that actually is where the going for the 0.5 for White maybe does make a little more sense, right? He's worth paying the premium, because even if you lose a clean sheet in the Villa match or the Spurs match or the Man City match, and it's hard for me to imagine them having more than one clean sheet in those 3. Right. And I'd say maybe 1, right? Because, early on in the season, you could see a cagey 0-0, right, in one of these matches. But
certainly, the City match in particular is sort of defined by the caginess.
Right.
So if you look at last season, the Arsenal defenders and Gabriel and Ben White were defined by certain stretches of form. Gabriel had that midseason run where he could not stop scoring, got the goal plus own goal assist. And then there was this inflection point near the end of the season when some managers wild carded into the home stretch, and Ben White became this differential pick. And that was coincided with his explosion. And then he went on this run where it was not matched by Saliba, Gabriel, anybody. Then there is Saliba, who was just kind of steady Eddie throughout the whole season. So what kind of manager do you want to be going into game week 1? Do you want to set that metronome, bring in Saliba and say, hey, I'm just going to see which way the wind is blowing, and then commit myself to maybe spending a transfer to upgrade to Ben White? Or are you going to be a little bit more aggressive, which I'm not surprised to hear you advocating for that, Josh.
Right.
Ben White is 100% based on what we saw at the end of last season, worth 0.5 extra.
Right.
But I do think, given all of the question marks that a fantasy manager has going into game week 1, having that 0.5 flexibility, Saliba feels like a sturdy enough foundation for us to build on. And craven as it sounds, it just feels like maybe that's the sensible pick. And I agree. I'm not sure about the strategy of I'm just going to go super small at the back. 4.5, 5.0 is the most I'm willing to spend, because always there are theories about defense for seasons, big at the back, small at the back, etc. What always happens is it all kind of balances out into, you probably should have 1 or 2 of the best positional players in your team at all times. And Arsenal is the best defense in the league for the last 365 days. So I'll have one of those.
I think that's right. I think, and it probably is foolish to bench Arsenal defenders even in these really tough matches, right? Because you just never kind of know when. Oh, I mean, also they could just go into Villa and Spurs and win there, right? I mean, it's not a 1-0 or something like that. It's not an impossible result in those matches, right? I know, again, I'm we're gonna, it's a I don't want to just sit here and say, we're going to go in the North London derby and just take it to, take it to Spurs, at their home stadium. But I do think it's at least in the realm of possibility, right? There's a 30% chance or something like that. Going into any particular match with Arsenal, I think that you can give them a really good chance of keeping a clean sheet just because their defense is so solid, right? So I'm agreeing with you. That's why they're at the top of my kind of tiers here. The next player on the list would be Trent, 7 million. I think he actually could be this season's ultimate boomer bust fantasy asset, where it feels to me instinctively, my feeling is too expensive. The entire kind of Liverpool defense feels like they're in a state of regression at the moment, right? Like they're aging players. We'll talk more about Van Dijk and Robbo in a second. And again, I'm talking fantasy here to a certain degree, although I think it's also true in general with Liverpool's defense. And so I think, to me, the question is, could he lock down a midfield spot, Trent? And if so, then you've got Trent as a kind of, like, I don't even really, the problem is, like, what is his role? Like, and Connor Bradley has been getting lots of minutes, granted, because Trent was gone for the Euros, but like Connor Bradley played well last season, is getting minutes right now. It seems like he's going to have to play some, right? And so,
maybe. I do want to pump the brakes on the whole Trent thing, because the move Trent into midfield has been a question for years now.
Sure.
And Gareth Southgate decided he was going to be the one, for whatever reason, to finally do it.
Right.
And it kind of blew up in his face over the course of a match and a half in the Euros. I don't see that as being a viable thing for Trent, even at Liverpool.
Yeah.
And I think it's bad news for Connor Bradley, because I as good of a player as I think he is, I don't think there's enough cause for him to start just playing in the Europa League over Trent in the Premier League.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's sure, but like regardless, like, how do you feel about Trent? Like, would you have him in your team? Are you interested in?
I think he's too expensive. At 7 million.
Yeah.
I think historically, it's good value. Like, writ large for Trent, 7 million seems like an honestly fair price.
Yeah.
For me today, not interested. I'm looking at the way the housing market is going. It's not going the direction of Trent Alexander-Arnold.
Yeah. I mean, and so the Ipswich match is so it's not the first match of game week 1, but it is it's the early match on game week 1, right? So they are in the kind of exclusive TV window, right? If you can, I don't know if you can find a pub in England. I don't know. It's always hard to, it's hard to see everything. I realize. Haven't they kind of made it easier this season? I feel like they've like relaxed the blackout rules or something. That's not for us to weigh in on, I suppose. But regardless, it's a big national window, international window for them. And I think that we could see something like, remember when Brentford hosted Arsenal to kick off their first season back in the Premier League, or their first season in the Premier League? And it was a 2-0 win. This is, I don't know, 5 years ago, whatever it was now.
Yeah.
And I just think Ipswich are really going to come out playing a really strong, they're going to, I guess my point is, like, it just goes to show you how I feel about Liverpool's defense right now, that even Ipswich away, and I'm already like, I don't know. Yeah, exactly. And Brentford at home, I'm like, well, Brentford can score a goal. I'm sort of I just don't feel any excitement about Liverpool defenders. And maybe it's just because they were such busts last season. And so I'm sort of, carrying that over a little bit, but I don't know what's changed except that they've gotten older. I mean, unless we just think that the new gaffer is just going to change everything. Right. Which I don't know. Like I'm not, I'll believe it when I see it, right? Like you're not going to make Van Dijk have like a 25-year-old's legs all of a sudden, right?
Sure. Well, this is the question for Liverpool. I feel like Liverpool bar Mo Salah, which I think is just the larger, you're either in or you're out at the start of the season.
Sure.
Question is, they feel like a perfect team to just wait a couple of weeks,
right?
And with the new management under Slot, there just could be a guy whose nickname, maybe it is Connor Bradley.
Yeah,
there could be a surprise,
right?
affordable.
Yeah.
Could be a surprise person.
Fulham. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, that is right. So I feel like Liverpool might be a surprise bargain shopping team if we're lucky.
Yeah. So maybe that's what it is. It's Trent and the entire team that feels boom or bust to me. Right. Lots of just too many question marks. This goes back to the new manager question before. It's just Slot and a number of other new managers this season. And which ones do I I don't know. I just want to see it, and so it's going to be help to be nimble. It's going to help to save up, Brandon, and have those 5 transfers in game week 6 to bang
Thank
out,
you.
move to move to move. Yeah, maybe me too. I don't know. We'll see. What am I doing? I'm just like kicking around. I'm all over the place. I'm running order already, Brandon, because you know what? It's so fun to talk about Liverpool. I have so many. I'm very interested in them this season. I really don't know what we're going to get from them.
Yeah, the discussion about them being at a wait and see is exactly that. It's not a dismissal of Slot or a dismissal of the club. It's just a kind of like, there's a lot of good things here. We just don't know where to put our money is the problem.
Yeah, exactly. And so it just makes sense, I think, to wait a couple of weeks. Salah is a little bit like Holland, where if you don't get him early, it's going to be really hard to bring him into your squad. Not impossible, but probably involves burning points if you want to do it right away. So that brings us to Gvardiol, who is the last player in my little elite tier here. And it's a bit of a projection, right? Because he hasn't necessarily earned it in terms of what he's done from a fantasy point of view. But, he's 6 million. He's already back with Man City. He's already participated in the friendlies. Overall numbers aren't too impressive from last season, right? 4 goals, 2 assists, 9 clean sheets. But Brandon, what if I told you that those 4 goals and 2 assists all came in the final 7 matches of last season? Yeah. It was an incredible, and it reminds me, to me, it's very reminiscent of Andrew Robertson when he joined Liverpool and had that kind of, I think he joined from Hull, right? And he had that kind of first season, and it was like, found his feet, took a while, wasn't like doing that much. And then kind of by the end of the season, Robbo was just incredible, right? And that was kind of, he was sort of part of the Liverpool's real, kind of rise. I think that we might be seeing that with Gvardiol now as well, right? He's only 22 years old. He did it's so obvious, even if you just look past the numbers, it's just obvious what an incredible player he is, right? I mean, he certainly passes any kind of eye test that you want to. I don't know. I always pause because I know how much people roll their eyes when they say this, but he's just,
some people don't have eyes, and you want to be respectful.
That's true, exactly. But he's fun to watch, right? He's a dynamic player. He's fun. He's fun to own in fantasy. He makes fantasy fun again, Brandon, when you have Gvardiol on your team. And so I am strongly leaning towards having Gvardiol in my squad, and it's a bit of a projection, but at 6 million, I don't think it's crazy. And I think the other thing is that if you want to kind of loop in, and I'm going to dip into tier 2 here, if you want to loop in Walker, Akanji, Ruben, and Ake, right? A quartet, Brandon.
It's the least inspiring group of elite defenders I've ever heard.
At least from a fantasy point of view, right? A quartet,
exactly.
A quartet of 5.5 million defenders, right? Not a ton of attacking threat from any of them. I suppose Walker has to be the pick until proven otherwise, right? Because Pep just trusts him, and he hasn't really shown he hasn't lost his pace, right? He's still fantastic. Had five assists for Man City last season. I guess Ruben is probably the safest pick, right? He's more of the kind of Saliba option if you want to go there with Man City. But again, it just feels like if you go up to 6 million and you get Gvardiol, it just feels like you're really getting a lot more. And I think it really feels to me, at least, and tell me if you disagree, like he's locked down that left back spot for Man City. He seems like a pretty reliable player going forward. So that's my case.
Him showing up for some of the preseason tour just feels like so great to me for fantasy. I was surprised. Stand by. I do feel like going back to the Arsenal conversation, if you were going to skimp in your defense, City feels like the place to do it. Like going back to the names that you just rattled off, from Ruben to Akanji to Walker.
Yeah.
This is not a refreshed Man City squad, even in the midfield. I wonder how sluggish City might look coming out of the gates, especially defensively. A team that has struggled to just keep a clean sheet, even in the face of scoring 5 goals. So I feel like Gvardiol you're getting for the upside, and you're not getting for that steady metronomic clean sheets the way we were talking about the Arsenal team. So Gvardiol, he's in my current draft, but he feels like dispensable if I need an extra 0.5 somewhere.
It's a real up and down thing. It's kind of interesting to me. I suppose if I trusted Liverpool more than I would I would actually say of these three, they have the more kind of unbalanced best starting six, right? Just because they don't have as many bad fixtures. Arsenal have three really good fixtures. Man City have a real mixed bag of fixtures, in my opinion. Sort of Ipswich and Brentford at home. Okay, those are pretty solid. Chelsea away in game week 1, I think is a tough away fixture. You could certainly see both teams scoring in that one. West Ham away, maybe not like incredibly tough, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if our boy Brandon Fulkrug is he's locked down that starting spot. He might be I don't know. Like he might carry 5 goals into that game 3 match, Brandon.
Incredible.
A hat trick. Maybe actually he's going to have 5 goals in one match and 0 in the other. That's incredible. I don't know which one of those 2 opening fixtures for West Ham.
It's kind of like an odd version of Bafétimbi Gomes, who started with 1 goal in his first 5
He's going to bring them all
the
together. Yeah, and it'd be offside fewer times than Gomes as well. But I think the problem with Liverpool is, again, that Robbo and Virgil, both available. They're more expensive for one thing than the quartet of players, and you get them at the same price as Guardiola. So they're 6 million. Both seem past their prime to me. Sorry to say it, but it just feels true to me. And I'm going to be honest here. I mean, Virgil is 33 years old. Robbo turns 31 this season. Robbo is barely a starter last season, right? I mean, he was really, down the stretch, he kind of earned it back, I suppose. But there's a lot of quality options in that Liverpool squad who are capable of playing in that left back spot. So I think it's tough to say that Robbo is just an absolute surefire starter, especially with the new manager coming in, right? There could be just things that he likes more. First of all, okay, just to be clear, I do think that Robbo is the starter for Liverpool, but I just think there's a little bit of risk there, and I just think also the older these players get, the more injury risk there is, right? I mean, just give me a 22-year-old Guardiola over a 31-year-old Robbo who's battled injuries on and off for several seasons now.
And Robbo's game isn't exactly like I'm going to be measured in my approach to the game, and I can oscillate depending on how much effort I want to put toward. His game is I'm going to sprint up and down the touchline all match long.
Exactly. Yeah, just full. I mean, like you got to love him, right? But yeah. And Virgil just doesn't. It seems like I don't know. I mean, I thought he had some nice moments for the Netherlands this summer.
And some bad ones.
Had some bad ones too. Had some goal threat. Had a goal probably should have scored, honestly. And it was sort of, I was watching a lot of Netherlands for reasons I can't get into on this particular podcast, Brandon. But yeah, I think that the one thing you could say in favor of them, looking purely at an early season kind of game week 1 squad, is that they have 3 really good home matches plus Ipswich to start the season. So if you just feel like punting on fixtures, which I think is always a reasonable play, then that's where you go. I just personally I'm not feeling it at the moment. There's too much risk with age and pricing and the new manager. The other player I've got in this kind of mid-tier is Pedro Porro. I think you've got to throw him up there just because he's such a talented attacking player. A player I'm also personally going to be avoiding to start the season, just because I still don't quite trust Spurs to keep clean sheets. It's kind of the same thing with Destiny Udogie, Udogie's cheap, but he's 5 million. I wish he was 4.5, right? I mean, Udogie's even worse, 5 clean sheets and 28 starts, right? Again, for like a top tier squad like Spurs, 5 clean sheets and 28 starts is absurd, right? That is way too low. And only 7 clean sheets for Porro. But at least with him, you get 3 goals and 8 assists as well, right? Quite a lot.
He's banging a man this preseason though, for fun.
Scored yesterday, over the weekend versus Bayern Munich. So a lot to like if you're looking, again, if you just, because I think that there's a certain kind of person who goes into this season who's just like, well, I don't really trust anyone to keep a clean sheet early on. And so I just want to get defenders that can score or I guess get assists, right? Like that you can get, what we call attacking returns, right? I just want somebody who can get attacking returns and I'm not even going to worry about whether they can keep a clean sheet. And I think that's, the point system is a factor here as well, right? And so I think that I don't think it's unreasonable to just be like, I want all fullbacks and I just want players who might be able to bang in a goal here and there.
Sure, and if you want a hot start, Leicester and Everton, Leicester away, Everton home for Spurs.
Yep.
Then they have two tough matches to follow it up with Newcastle and Arsenal. But a hot start and just 2 game weeks is a great gift to a manager.
Yeah.
So Porro could give you that and then Porro leaves immediately for whichever defender you thought you missed the boat on.
I've had Van de Ven in and out of my squad, the kind of the 4.5 million kind of version of that. I mean, it's a good price if you think that they are improving enough defensively. And he also had some nice moments, this summer. So, all right. So then the other couple of players in this kind of mid tier, Fabian Schär, I think he's the premium pick for Newcastle. Feels a tiny bit overpriced at 5.5 million, but you really couldn't have priced him any lower, I don't think, right? Like 4 goals, 3 assists, 9 clean sheets. He is an immortal lock when healthy to be a starter for that Newcastle team.
Mortal lock or immortal lock?
I actually, as I said it, I think it's a mortal lock. And then I was like, do I want to stop my flow in the middle to correct myself?
No, I'll do that for you.
Do it for
Thank
me.
you very much.
Okay. And mortal lock, I believe. Immortal kind of works though as well, right?
Yeah. I didn't want you to take that one for granted.
No, he's got a kind of Highlander-esque lock in that squad, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Sure, and there can only be one Schär. That's sure.
Absolutely true.
Yeah. Newcastle defense. I wonder if the guy I'm actually interested in is farther down. I guess I'll just spoiler alert. It's Livramento. I'm looking for possible stake in the Newcastle defense, but I'm nowhere near willing to pay 5.5 for it.
Yeah, I mean, we can do them as well. I mean, I think the question here is you have Dan Burn versus Livramento, right? And I mean, is it even worth having either one when we don't know going into the season who is going to be the starter? I mean, Livramento is he's the player for the future, right? But every time you see an interview with Eddie Howe, he talks about how much he loves Dan Burn and how integral he is to the squad. And so, does it make you feel like you just drop both of them and just not take the risk?
Dan Burn is not a guy you build a defense around. Trippier too. There were rumors that maybe he was heading out to Bayern Munich. Those seem to have quieted down a little bit, but it seems like Newcastle are smart enough to know they need to offload some of these guys because they have they have a deep enough squad to come in and do it for cheaper wages, honestly.
And also, I mean, Dan Burn may play as a center back as well. We actually we might have to dig into the Newcastle defense stuff a little bit, right? Because Sven Botman is out until probably January, right? And so they're going to need to line up, and they actually same with Jamal Lascelles, right? So they have options like other players that can play that they can pair with Schär, but it's not. I don't know. So it could be that we get Burns as a the left-sided center back, left-sided, right? I think I've got that right. And then you could play Livramento, and then I guess that might be how they do it. So it's it's interesting.
So, God, Livramento. Suddenly, I'm on the fly looking at putting him into my squad, but it's hard. It's hard to justify. I don't know.
I think it's tricky. Yeah, you've got there's just I think it's really tricky to figure out where this is just it's gonna be a recurring question when it comes to defenders, right? Because the value is there if you feel confident. This is actually really where you need to start digging into the team forums a little bit too, right? Because you tend to get little nuggets that inside information and things that managers said, like in local press conferences and things like that. I often find in the last week of the season that I'm on lots of Midlands newspaper websites, like the ones that are non-paywalled Midlands newspaper websites trying to figure out what's, I mean, I know that the Newcastle's of course in the north of England, but
let's blue sky. Yeah. Let's blue sky with Newcastle for a little bit. Yeah. Everything was made about the Saudis coming in and buying Newcastle, about they have more money than even Manchester City, perhaps.
Yep.
What's the goal is clearly to become a City-esque club within England to win the Champions League.
Yeah.
Their ambition got knocked back last season. They had an admirable showing in the Champions League with nothing to show for it.
Yeah.
And then they failed to qualify. Not seeing a ton of investment this summer by Newcastle, so I'm not sure where all this money is supposed to be. Nonetheless, is their ambition? Like, I don't know. What do you expect to see from Newcastle this season?
That's a good question. I don't know. I'm not like a full on Howe believer. Like, it kind of feels like he's maybe taken this project as far, in fact, possibly regressed a little bit. It just depends on how much you want to sort of give him a little bit of grace for the insane number of injuries. Like, everyone had a lot. Last year, we just saw a lot of injuries across the Premier League, but it did feel like Newcastle was kind of exceptionally banged up, right? They, they're one of their big signings. Tonali ended up getting suspended for a year. It was for gambling, right? Was that what? Yeah. So
yeah, he's back in the kit announcement Instagram post.
Oh, he is.
So
okay.
All is forgiven.
Yeah,
now.
It looks like, and on the site it says he's back as of September 1. So he's like a new signing, Brandon. It's like Jurrien Timber, he's like a new signing. So I don't know. It doesn't feel like in general some of the transfer news is a little bit slow. I feel like we haven't seen like a lot of like home runs so far. I should say we've seen good signings, but we haven't seen like the kind of marquee is a better word than home run.
Yeah, I guess Mbappe to Real Madrid.
Sure,
so
internationally,
like a foregone conclusion.
Yeah,
and that happened just in this churn of other sports news. So that kind of went under the radar almost.
Yeah, that team's going to be annoyingly good, aren't they? They Mbappe and Bellingham and Vinny Jr. Yeah, that's a good squad. Good. All right. So, and then let's see one more. So we'll talk more about Newcastle. I think also next week's pod, this is an always cheating promise, Brendan. Next week's pod, you and I will start off the pod and we will go through both of our squads, player by player, right? And so we can, and I think you'll see some of the kind of 4.5 million players that we've settled on in that pot. And I think that's something, it's just hard to come on here and it's more like I want to just sort of like lay out a range of options, right? And sort of focus on, not get too caught up in the weeds about who's going to start over who all across the board, right? Because some of that stuff is too short term, right? It's better to focus on Liverpool, Man City, are like sort of think big picture about the players that are really going to be what are probably going to set the tone for your for your team this season.
For sure.
And then one last player in that mid tier is Jared Branthwaite, $5 million, come back from injury. So again, one for the future. But if he stays at Everton or if he moves to Man United, who is the team he's most heavily rumored to go to, he's a great option. He had 12 clean sheets, 3 goals, 1 assist. I think if he moved to Man United, he basically would start from day one and be if that move happened, I think he'd be one of the most transferred in players that month. Like he'd be heavily transferred.
Following in the great footsteps of Harry Maguire. I will sign for Manchester United to barge my way into the England squad, and then my career will be completely catatonic from that moment forward.
It does feel that way a little bit, right down to them seemingly negotiating against themselves, right? So anyway, so we'll see what happens there. So then, Brandon, we'll wrap things up on the defenders with the cheapies. 5 million tier. We talked about Udogie already. Daniel Munoz came on really strong on the second half of last season. Priced at 5 million. If he was at 4.5, he'd be an auto lock for my squad going into game week 1. 4 assists, had 5 clean sheets and just 16 starts. So very impressive. I mean, take that, Udogie, who had 5 and 28. So what do you think about Munoz? You're a fan, aren't you? I feel like you're a Munoz guy.
Yes, and I mean he was integral to Colombia's success in the Copa America this summer too. So like he's not only emerged under Glasner's system at Palace, now he's doing bits for Colombia internationally. Like he's just a quintessential player who is just like he's blossomed. Josh,
he's a blossomer. And
I guess
a great 90s TV show just turned into a great Crystal Palace defender.
Mayim Bialik and Daniel Munoz. Daniel Munoz? Yeah. Also sounds a lot like the Malcolm in the Middle guy, too. Now I'm getting him confused with Frankie Muniz. Anyway.
He should change his name, though, with Udogie. Because I feel like it should be Daniel Udogie and Destiny Munoz. Like those should be... those names fit better to me, So I'm just gonna say, you don't like Destiny Munoz? I think that sounds incredible. That'd be like the greatest name I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah, it sounds good. But I I guess if I'm swerving Eze at the moment, Palace is a team that we're kind of all having to reckon with as far as how much is their form from the end of last season going to move into this season. There's no reason to believe that they won't be a fantastic team to start again this season. So what kind of meaningful piece of that team can you get? And I think if you don't get an attacking player like Eze, Munoz probably has to be in your squad.
I know it's just really I just don't like spending $5 million on kind of mid-table defenders. It's just like such a I don't know.
So it's a bit of a leap of faith with Palace, right? That you believe that this system that they're playing is going to take them not necessarily out of mid-table, but to that eighth to sixth place band for certain segments of the season, to where like that's a firecracker at $5 million. I think it's very much worth it.
So is he in your squad right now? Are you?
He is. I had Joachim Anderson for the cheap guy at 4.5 for a while, and I just felt like not very fun. Why
have hamburger when you can have steak, Brandon? Right.
So what I've done in my defense is I've got Saliba, Guardiola, and to get Munoz and to justify that expense, I have gone with two 4.0 guys to back them up.
Well, we'll talk more. There are some options. So this is not a crazy. Well, let's keep moving through this then. So the 4.5 million tier, we talked about Dan Burn, a little bit risky though. Maybe not so. I mean, I don't know. We need to get a better handle on that. Maybe we'll talk to some Newcastle supporters ahead of next week's pod and get and come up with a more definitive take, Brandon. The player that we haven't talked about yet that I think is really exciting is Leif Davis. We did mention him like in the forward pod because I was just so interested in him. But he had 2 goals and a ludicrous 21 assists in 43 championship matches. And he was not an out of position fullback, Brandon. That was just his normal position. 21 assists in 43 matches. You can get him for $4.5 million. I like him. And so you've got Munoz in your team right now. I have Leif Davis in my team, Brandon. And I am looking forward to finding some minutes for Leif Davis.
Great.
Perhaps not right at the start of the season. It might be more of a bench option. But I think if you look down, I think Ipswich have, they've got some decent matches sort of starting in game week 3. The Fulham at home, Southampton away, even Brighton away. I think you could, again, you don't, when you buy a player like Leif Davis, Brandon, you're not buying him for the, you're not buying him for the clean sheets. You're buying him for those 21 assists, those sweet attacking returns. All right, let's do these kind of lightning round style. Ezra Konsa, you want to do the sound effect, don't you? There we go. Ezra Konsa, not a lot of goal threat, but the cheapest way into Villa's defense. Mickey Van de Ven, see above, but for Konsa, you can, or for Aston Villa, you can swap in Spurs, kind of the same. This is a classic fantasy thing, right? Get the cheapest guy from a good team, and so that, I think Konsa fits the bill nicely. It just feels like a sensible move. Like it feels like when you look at like some of the smart fantasy managers that consistently do well, I just think you're going to see Konsa in a lot of them because it's just a solid, sensible move. And,
constant Konsa.
Yeah, exactly. Constant Konsa.
Lewis Dunk. Katie Lang song just became a great way to play fantasy.
I was going to say a great email, direct email service. Sure. Yeah. Lewis Dunk, he's down to 4.5 million or being 5 million for 3 of the past 4 seasons. He was always too much. But so now we can at least consider Lewis Dunk again. Not really a game week 1 kind of option, I don't think. Poor run of fixtures to start. But it's fun to have him back in the conversation, Brandon, I would say. Yes. Dunk at 4.5. And then I do think there's more 4.4 million defender value than usual. You talked about having a couple. I don't know if you have any of these options, but Wout Faes and Yannick Vestergaard are both 4 million defenders for Leicester. Luke Wolfenden for Ipswich. They're all on promoted teams. Taylor Harwood-Bellis for Southampton are a number of players that have a good chance of being 4 million starters this season. Are those? Do you have anyone from that pool?
I do have Wout Faes just because he seems like he probably will start 38 matches, and that's like great value at 4.0, even though you might never play him. But the other guy is Valentin Barco, who is on on Brighton, and he is benefiting from the Estupiñán injury. So Barco is playing in Estupinan's place, and it looks like Estupiñán is out until beyond October probably. And even the really encouraging thing about Barco too is that he has been taking set pieces in the preseason, including corner kicks. Now, imagine having a defensive asset who's on corner kicks. Porro is an example of this, like where you do, rake in BPS if you take set pieces like that and successful crosses. So Barco is probably a very temporary player, assuming Estupiñán comes back fit at some point. But I think it's with the team with the upside of Brighton, feels like a great investment to start.
It's a great shout. I love that, and I had some family business this week, Brandon, and so I'm a little out of pocket, and so I appreciate the Barco shout. All right, so Valentin Barco, available for $4 million, ownership at 9.9%. So I'm already behind the word's out on Barco. Yeah, the word is out on Barco. Yeah, and you snooze, you lose, Brandon. That's why we do this podcast to keep ourselves and everybody listening firmly in the loop. So, Brandon, let's quickly move on to goalkeepers here and wrap up today's conversation. A few quick notes, and then I'll have a couple questions for you. So one is that there's no keeper over 5.5 million this season. 5.5 million is the cap. That might have been the same last year as well, but it's sort of interesting that we were kind of officially out of the realm of the 6 million or more keeper. I think kind of the word is out. You just really don't want expensive keepers in fantasy for two reasons. One is that you often get just a straight up better return from a cheaper goalkeeper, just because those keepers tend to have these kind of random matches where they, keep 9 saves. They have 9, they concede 2 goals, but they have 9 saves and they save a pen or whatever, right? It's like there's enough kind of rando 18-point hauls from these kind of cheaper ones that they end up outperforming the more expensive goalkeepers.
Simple logic is season. The better teams will concede fewer shots there, and they will. Right. So therefore, the keeper on that better team will have fewer opportunities to accrue fantasy points. So you're really stuck with the ceiling of 6 million with somebody like Raya.
Yeah, exactly. And 6 points. And and you also and even you maybe get 1 bonus point, or maybe you get one save point. But the other problem is that it locks up a third spot for these top teams, right? And so if Arsenal are just they have this incredible run of fixtures, and you really want to have 2 Arsenal midfielders and an attacking defender who has some attacking threat, then you're kind of stuck with the keeper, right? Because it never really makes sense to burn a transfer to take out a really strong keeper like Raya, right? But it doesn't necessarily it doesn't necessarily behoove you to have them over the other options. So I think you and I will both be avoiding the more expensive keepers. I do think there's some in the 5 million range. The other question, and I sort of promised myself I wouldn't do this again, and I'm trying to stick to my guns here, is I think I might be done with goalkeeper rotation, like just straight up. I don't want to do it anymore. It has never worked for me. And I am genuinely, I just don't know that it works. And it always it seems so elegant when you're planning your team. It's like you see these color coded fixtures and you're like, these are the good ones and these are the bad ones. And you start the player for the good ones, but somehow it never works. Right. And you're just intensely frustrated all season. And so I'm just like, well, maybe I just have either one 4.5 million defender or one 5 million defender. And you've got, a couple of 4.5 million options that I think are interesting, right? You have Flecken, who came on late and was really, honestly, I got the worst of him. Like he kind of destroyed my team, but but honestly, I had Pickford as well at the start of the season. He was terrible for me as well. And so you have to play the long game with keepers, right? Yeah, any 4 to 6 week window, it's hard to look at it and draw any sort of significant conclusions. But so Flecken came on late, ended up having a pretty decent season after a bad start. Jose Sa finally priced at 4.5 million. He's been more expensive than that, I think, every season. And so having him at 4.5, I think, is interesting. They have a really poor fixture run to start the season. Yeah. This probably takes them out of the equation. The starting keepers for Palace and Chelsea are both interesting, but it's not clear who the top option is going to be, right? You have Sanchez at Chelsea, but now Jorgensen has been brought in, and it kind of feels like it might be a situation where he's one mistake away.
How is Sanchez the starting keeper at Chelsea? Like, I just don't see he got injured last season, but he never won that spot back. That was like such a weird signing to begin with,
right? And Petrovic too. There's basically 3 keepers now, right? It's like one of them will probably move right before the season starts, I would imagine. And so we'll, maybe we'll know more there in the next 2 weeks. It's possible. But it's the same thing with Crystal Palace, unfortunately, which is that you have Henderson and you have Johnstone, and Johnstone was actually playing quite well, got injured, and I think he was out the last few months of the season. I don't have it in front of me here, Brandon. But, so I think that it just feels up in the air who the starting keeper is going to be for Crystal Palace going into the season. And so I think that's kind of an avoid. I don't necessarily want to just have both of them, right? Like that feels like kind of like too much of a hedge, to me, to like just have both Palace keepers. Too. Yeah, it feels corny. Yeah, exactly. I don't like it. So I don't know. So I think I don't know. I'm a little on the fence right now about what I want to do with my keepers. What are you leaning towards at the moment?
I'm leaning toward easy peasy Jordan Pickford and 4.0 piece of crap guy who is not going to play.
Who's not Matt Turner?
Who is not Matt Turner? Actually, I should make it Matt Turner for fun, just to show all you haters out there.
Sure.
Some people still like Matt Turner. But just like the struggle for the 4.5 guy, it's a hard one. And it's a long, painful road. It will earn out over the course of the season. So maybe I pay a little extra, and if I can save some money on my first wild card and jump on whoever that 4.5 guy turns out to be. But the thing about Everton was, you talked about having Pickford at the start of last season and it really burned you. And I think there was something about Dyche's Everton that just really started to gel in the last 2 months of the season. You started to see that Burnley-esque watertight defense, and they started to get that down. And Pickford started just like raking in easy save points because of them conceding just like low XG shots, and he's a good shot stopper to begin with.
Yep.
So 5.0 for the league leading fantasy goalkeeper last season, and a team that I expect is like more consistent defensive performances from this season feels right. It feels like a deal to me.
And they honestly have quite a nice start to the season as well. I mean, a handful of tricky fixtures mixed in there: Spurs away, Villa away, and the first 4. But in general, he's probably the keeper that has the best chance of keeping the most clean sheets going into whenever you play that first wild card, right? I'm just sort of looking at his run of fixtures, and it doesn't really get bad until December, right? Mm-hmm. Like in December, they play Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea, Man City, like 1, 2, 3, 4. But that's fixtures 15, 16, 17, and 18, right? It's like literally the end of their, because the before the turn, right? Because every team obviously plays 19 teams twice, right? And so it's like before the turn of into the second half of the season. So you can have them, and then whenever you play that wild card, which you can possibly play later now that you can kind of accrue more transfers and sort of bide your time a little bit more. I think that he does make a lot of sense. The question for me is just whether I just want to kind of just get the 4.5 million guy anyway, and just hope that I can get there with Fleck in, and that, it's like if you look through, Review or any of these kind of sites, the difference in price between, or the difference in return, like what you're getting, it just doesn't look that massive, right? Like if I'm comparing 5 million keepers for the first, if I'm just comparing 5 million down keepers for the first 6 weeks of the season, Pickford is only on pace to outscore Flecken. This is actually through the first 8 weeks of the season by 0.4 points. Right? They project a total of 26.8 versus 26.4. So if nothing else, and I think your argument for Pickford is sound, but if nothing else, it's another argument for why you just don't have the 5.5 million guys, right?
Yeah,
and that at the very least, go for the 4.5 million guys. Martinez at 5 million is not a terrible shot either. I mean, 5 million is not a crazy price for him.
I'm surprised by that, especially with Villa being as good as they were last season. The fantasy towers didn't price him up to 5.5, so it's a good shout.
Yeah. Then you've got like the kind of people that I think you and I have kind of given up on: Vicario, Onana.
No, thank you.
Yeah, Pope. Maybe Pope. I mean, he's back from. He's not the young Pope anymore, but he's back and getting it done.
New Pope, like new Coke.
The new Pope. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Vicario, there was some article in The Athletic about like Vicario getting over some yips or something bad that happened with COVID. His form last season. And I didn't get it. I was like, Vicario was amazing last season and probably like the best new keeper in the league.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't his fault.
No, like that whole team just like a little bit like Newcastle suffered from some injury crisis and was also just trying to really adapt to this full new philosophy from Ange. And the fact that Vicario on that defense did as well as they did, I expect great things from Vicario this season.
Yeah, it feels to me, I'm not a Spurs supporter, nor do I follow everything that Ange does, but it just feels to me like philosophically, they're not supremely interested in keeping clean sheets, right? And it's just not a high priority for them, which is, I think, a big change from a lot of other managers at top clubs, right? They tend to really value possession, and they're kind of fine with the occasional 0-0, right? We talked about this at the start of the pod with Arsenal and Man City, and but Ange doesn't. It feels like he's going to go for it, and that makes for incredible entertainment. I mean, makes someone like Son super viable, and maybe even others for Charleston possibly. Like we'll see, but it does make their defenders and goalkeepers very frustrating.
Well, this is why you go back to Porro, where his attacking upside is so great, and it jives with our understanding of Ange's philosophy and his system and what you'd expect from that team is attacking. And instead of while Vicario, I might have just sort of said is as good as Pickford in terms of fantasy stakes. There is Porro to go for Spurs, and there is no other Everton defender that I want, even by some stretch.
This is partially why I wish they actually did start with like odd numbers with the prices, or that, because like, wouldn't you kind of like Porro if he was 5.2 million? Like if he was 5.2, I'd probably, I mean, if he was the only one that was 5.2, maybe they wouldn't work.
Pricing run by the Pitchfork Best New Album Ratings Committee.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that'd be kind of cool actually if everybody's on a 10-point scale and adjusted accordingly. All right, Brandon, that is enough. There's lots. The goalkeeper stuff, it's just it's almost like a matter of like taste a little bit too. It depends on what you want. If you want to just set and forget it and never really don't stress about it too much, I think Pickford is the option. I think if you want to go with a 4.5, I'm leaning towards Flecken just because I think he can get you there to that first wild card. And you can say maybe you invest that money elsewhere. But that's it. That's it for this today's pod. We got a lot of questions that we got in the Discord for today's pod, and we're running long, and so we're going to move those to a Patreon exclusive mailbag Q&A. We'll do another call for questions on our Discord for that. So if you want to support the podcast, you can go to patreon.com/alwayscheating. Thanks again also to the Hub for sponsoring and supporting the podcast. Brandon, do you want to thank our producer or patrons?
Absolutely. Big thanks to producers Mike DeVitro, Trevor Ingerson, Dave Wegner-Lodahl, our buddies Chris Howell, Andy Penn, Nick Wright, Lazaros Llanos, Jesse Halstead, Bruce Kerr, Brian Chin, Bobbas Kuhn, Ron Frost, Blair Jacobson, Todd Byerly, Andy Portlock, Dan Parsons, Terrence O'Donnell, Kerry Swanson, Jefferson Turner, Easy Does It, Francis Moore, Sam Shower, Craig Jackson, Caleb Robbie, Brian Clark, Thomas Tislow, Fro Jacobson, The Saint, Gareth H., Shalin F. Gadakia, Rishi Negum, Noah and Louise, Travis Grant, Linus Vennerstrom, Matthew Skinner, Ben Coombs, Eric Kite, and Rune Sandberg. And last but not least, James Murray Wood. Listen, guys, if Patreon is not your thing, you could be a big hero to the podcast for free. just rate, review, subscribe, share this podcast wherever you're on social media. Spread the word. That really helps us, especially here at the start of the season. Follow us on Twitter, at Hail Cheaters, wherever you get your social media. All this information, including the code to our big listener mini league, the Always Cheating Super League, is on our website, alwayscheating.com. All right.
Yeah, let's throw James C and James Holland into that producer pool as well, Brandon.
We'll fix it in post.
Yeah, we'll fix it in post.
James
thank
C,
you to
James
our
Holland.
newest producer. There you go.
Outstanding. Yeah, well, that's a wrap on our positional previews. And next week, I think it gets really real when we look at player by player our game week 1 squad. So I'll see you then, Josh.
That sounds good. I'm excited for the game week 1 preview. Although I will say, I think it has been helpful. And if you haven't listened back to the midfield or forward pods, I do recommend it. We used to do this in a different way. We used to go kind of team by team. And although it was very fun to do, I think from a kind of strategic standpoint, it's been more helpful, I think, even just putting this all together to look at it kind of positionally like this, right? Because I just think there's like a kind of wider pool of players that you consider when you look at it through this lens. So hopefully that is helpful for people. And if you enjoyed the pod, let us know. If you have friends that are new to fantasy for the first time this year and they're looking for something that's maybe a little bit lighter, then recommend our pod. And tell them the cheaters sent you. And we'll talk to you soon. Thanks again, guys. Bye.